She was promised to an earl, but she fell in love with the duke her family swore to destroy. There are promises that imprison, there are hatreds that cross generations, and there are loves that destroy empires. Lady Arabella Ashford never imagined that a single night could shatter everything she knew. Promised since childhood to the Earl of Thornfield, she believed her destiny was sealed. But when her eyes met those of the Duke of Ravenscroft, the man her family swore to destroy, something inside her awakened, something dangerous, something irreversible. This is the story of an impossible choice, between duty and desire, between loyalty and truth, between two men and a secret that could destroy them all. Subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Let's start this epic journey together. Ashford Manor gleamed like a jewel in the darkness of London. Arabella watched her reflection in the mirror while her lady's maid adjusted the final details of her ivory silk gown. The fabric slipped smoothly against her skin, the empire waist marking delicately just below her bust. It was a perfect dress for a perfect bride, but when she looked into her own eyes, she didn't see a bride. She saw a prisoner. "You look beautiful, my lady." Martha's voice echoed low, almost reverent. Arabella didn't respond. Her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted the golden Venetian mask that would cover half her face that night. The summer masquerade ball was the most anticipated event of the season, and tonight her father would officially announce her engagement to the Earl of Thornfield, Lord Edmund Whitmore, the Earl of Thornfield. She repeated the name mentally, trying to feel something, anything. But all that came was an icy emptiness, like walking barefoot on cold marble in the dead of winter. 21 years. That was the time Arabella had on this earth, and 18 of those years were spent knowing exactly what her future would be. Marriage, children, duty. The Earl was a good match, everyone said so. Wealthy, respectable, from an old family. But when he looked at her, Arabella felt as if she were being evaluated, not loved. Like a horse at auction. Good lineage, good posture, good investment. "It's time, my lady." Martha held her hand for a moment, and Arabella realized the older woman knew about the weight she carried, knew about the invisible cage. Arabella descended the staircase with the grace that years of training had sculpted into her movements. Each step was measured, each breath controlled. Below, the ballroom teemed with life. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over the masked guests, dancing in swirls of silk and velvet. The air smelled of fresh roses, candle wax and something more subtle. Ambition, perhaps, or perfumed lies. Her father, Lord Ashford, waited at the foot of the stairs. Tall, imposing, with the black mask that made his eyes seem even more penetrating. He extended his arm and she accepted because there was no choice. "Today is an important day, Arabella." His voice was low only for her. "The Earl is eager. Don't disappoint him. Don't disappoint him. Never disappoint. Always smile. Always obey." The words were like chains. "Yes, father." They walked together through the ballroom and Arabella felt the gazes upon her, evaluating, judging, envying perhaps. She was Lady Arabella Ashford, daughter of one of the most powerful men in England. But in that moment, dressed in white like a sacrificial virgin, she felt small, invisible, even under so many eyes. That's when she saw him. He was on the other side of the ballroom, leaning against a marble column with a glass of wine in his hands. He wore a simple black mask, but it was impossible not to notice him. Something about him demanded attention. His posture was relaxed, almost indifferent, but there was a dangerous intensity in every line of his body. Tall, broad shoulders beneath an impeccable black coat, dark hair that touched lightly at his collar. And then, as if feeling the weight of her gaze, he turned his head. Their eyes met. The world stopped. Arabella felt the air escape from her lungs. There was something in those eyes, even through the mask, that pierced through her. Something wild and forbidden, dangerous. He didn't look away, didn't smile, just saw her, really saw her. As if all the layers of silk, posture and education had been stripped away, and he was looking directly at her naked soul. Her heart beat erratically. Her hands sweated inside her lace gloves. "Arabella." Her father's voice pulled her back. "The Earl is waiting for us." She blinked, forcing herself to look away, but even as she walked toward the man who would be her husband, she felt the stranger's eyes burning on her back like live embers. Lord Edmund Whitmore, the Earl of Thornfield, received her with a polite smile. He was handsome in a way, blonde hair, blue eyes, aristocratic features. But when he held her hand to kiss it, Arabella felt nothing. No warmth, no cold, just nothing. "Lady Arabella." His voice was soft, polished, perfect. "You look stunning tonight." "Thank you, my lord." The words were automatic, rehearsed. "I hope you'll grant me the first dance." She nodded, because that's what was expected of her. The music began, a slow, melancholic waltz. The Earl led her to the center of the ballroom, and Arabella moved with the precision of a wind-up doll. One step, two, turn. Her feet knew the choreography by heart, but her mind was elsewhere. It was on the man in the black mask who still watched her from the column. "You're distracted." The Earl's voice cut through her thoughts. "Forgive me, my lord. It's just the excitement of the evening." He smiled, satisfied with the answer. "Understandable. After all, we'll be officially announced soon." Announced. Like property sold. Arabella forced a smile, but felt something shatter inside her. A tiny crack. Almost imperceptible. But it was there. When the waltz ended, the Earl led her back to her father's side. There were other guests, other empty conversations. Arabella smiled, nodded, said the right words. But she was suffocating. "Excuse me," she murmured low to no one in particular. "I need air." Before anyone could stop her, Arabella slipped between the guests and escaped to the terrace. The night air hit her like a cold slap. She breathed deeply, gripping the stone balustrade while closing her eyes. The stars above were distant points of freedom, unreachable. "Running away?" The voice came from the shadows, and Arabella turned abruptly. It was him. The man in the black mask emerged from the darkness as if he were part of it. He moved with feline grace, dangerous. And when he stopped a few steps away, Arabella felt every nerve ending in her body awaken. Her voice failed. "I needed air." "Liar." The word was said with cruel softness. He tilted his head, studying her. "You're running away from all of that." He gestured vaguely toward the ballroom, from the gilded cage. Arabella should have been offended, should have ordered him to leave. But she couldn't, because he was right. "Who are you?" she whispered. He took a step forward. The moonlight touched half his face, revealing a strong jaw, firm lips and eyes. God, those eyes! They were dark as night, but burned with something she couldn't name. Someone who shouldn't be here. His voice was deep, hoarse, and someone who definitely shouldn't be talking to you. "Why?" He smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was dangerous, devastating. "Because your father hates me. Because your family swore to destroy me." He paused, and the air between them became electric. "And because you, Lady Arabella Ashford, are promised to another man." Her heart raced. "How do you know my name?" "Everyone knows your name. The perfect daughter of Lord Ashford. The virginal bride of the Earl of Thornfield." He took another step, and now he was so close she could feel the heat of his body. "But I see something they don't see." "What?" The word came out as a trembling whisper. "A woman trapped in invisible chains." He raised his hand slowly, and Arabella held her breath when his fingers lightly touched the golden mask covering her face. "And I wonder, what would happen if those chains broke?" She should pull back. Should scream. Should do anything except stand there, paralyzed, while this stranger touched her with forbidden intimacy. But she did none of that, because for the first time in her life, Arabella felt alive. "Who are you?" she asked again, her voice almost a sigh. He held her chin gently, forcing her to face him, and when he spoke, each word was a sentence. "I am Alexander Blackwell, the Duke of Ravencroft." His eyes burned into hers. I am the man your family swore to destroy. And you, my dear Lady Ashford," he leaned in until his lips almost touched hers, "are the last person in the world I should be with." And then, before she could breathe, before she could think, he kissed her. The kiss wasn't gentle. It wasn't the kind of kiss a lady should receive from a gentleman on a moonlit terrace. It was hunger. It was desperation. It was as if Alexander Blackwell was stealing something that didn't belong to him and knew exactly the price he'd pay for it. And Arabella, God help her, kissed him back. Her fingers clutched at the lapel of his coat, pulling him closer when she should have been pushing him away. His mouth moved against hers with an expertise that frightened and ignited her at the same time. He kissed her as if he knew secrets she didn't even know existed, as if he were mapping every inch of her surrender. When he finally pulled away, Arabella was breathless, trembling, shattered. That was... She couldn't finish the sentence. "Her mistake," Alexander completed, but his eyes said otherwise. He still held her by the waist, his fingers pressing the thin fabric of her dress. "A glorious mistake. You said you're the Duke of Ravenscroft." The words came out trembling. "My father speaks of you as if you were the devil himself." "Perhaps I am." He released her slowly, but didn't step away. "Your father and I have history." "What kind of history?" Alexander hesitated. For the first time since he'd appeared in the shadows, she saw something break in his expression. Pain, ancient and deep. The kind that ends in blood. Before Arabella could ask more, the terrace door opened violently. She turned, her heart racing, and saw her younger sister, Cecilia, standing in the doorway. The 16-year-old girl had wide eyes. "Arabella, father is looking for you. He's going to—" Cecilia stopped abruptly when her eyes landed on Alexander. Her face paled. "You?" Alexander inclined his head in a mocking gesture. "Lady Cecilia, always a pleasure." "Get out of here," the girl's voice trembled. "Before I scream." "Cece, wait," Arabella began, but her sister cut her off. "Do you know who he is? Do you know what he did?" "I know who he is." Arabella raised her chin, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "And no, I don't know what he did. No one ever told me." Cecilia looked between the two, horrified. "Arabella, if father finds out you were here, alone with him, then don't tell him." Alexander spoke softly, but there was steel in his words. "Unless you want to see your sister punished for a crime that was mine." Cecilia pressed her lips together. For a long moment no one moved. Then, with a cutting look at Alexander, she grabbed Arabella's hand. "Come, now." Arabella allowed her sister to pull her back inside, but looked back one last time. Alexander remained on the terrace, a solitary figure wrapped in shadows. His eyes met hers, and in that look there was a silent promise. This isn't over. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Arabella smiled, danced, accepted congratulations for the imminent engagement. But her mind was stuck on that kiss, on the heat of Alexander's fingers on her waist, on the way he looked at her, as if she were simultaneously salvation and ruin. When she finally retired to her chambers, it was past midnight. Martha helped her undress in silence, but Arabella noticed the woman's worried look. "What is it, Martha?" The lady's maid hesitated. "It's not my place, my lady." "Say it anyway." Martha sighed, putting the dress aside. "I saw you on the terrace, with him." Arabella froze. "Are you going to tell my father?" "No." Martha held her hands, and there were tears in the older woman's eyes. "But you need to understand, my lady. The Duke of Ravenscroft, he's not just a scandal, he's dangerous. Why does everyone say that, but no one explains?" Martha closed her eyes. "Because the truth is ugly, and because your father swore that no one would ever speak about what happened." "What happened, Martha?" Arabella squeezed her hands. "Please." The older woman opened her mouth, then closed it. Finally, with a broken voice, she whispered, "The Duke of Ravenscroft killed your brother." The world tilted. Arabella felt her legs fail and Martha supported her, guiding her to the bed. Her brother, Jonathan Ashford. He had died 6 years ago when she was 15. They said it was a hunting accident. They said it was tragic. They said so many things, but they never said that. How? The word came out strangled. It was a duel. Martha held her shoulders, keeping her steady. Your brother and the Duke were friends. Best friends, actually. But there was an argument. No one knows about what. And when the sun rose that morning, she swallowed hard, only one of them was alive. Alexander killed Jonathan, Arabella repeated, trying to make the words make sense. My father knows this. Everyone knows, but duels are illegal, so it was never officially investigated. And the Duke, he never denied it. But he also never explained. Martha wiped a tear running down Arabella's face. Your father swore revenge that day. Swore he'd destroy the Blackwell family, even if it took the rest of his life. Arabella stood abruptly, bile rising in her throat. She stumbled to the window, opening it, letting the cold night air invade the room. Alexander Blackwell had killed her brother, and she had kissed him. My God, she whispered to the night. What have I done? She didn't sleep. How could she? Every time she closed her eyes, she saw two images colliding. Jonathan with his easy smile and gentle eyes, teaching her to ride when she was a child. And Alexander, dangerous and impossible, kissing her as if she were the only real thing in the world. At dawn, Arabella had already made a decision. She needed to see him again, not for anything romantic, but to understand, to hear from him what really happened. Because something inside her, something insane and self-destructive, refused to believe that the man who kissed her was a cold-blooded murderer. She dressed alone, choosing a simple walking dress in moss-green tones. She pinned her hair in a loose bun and covered herself with a cloak. Then, before she could change her mind, she slipped out of the mansion through the back. The morning air was fresh, smelling of dew and wet grass. Arabella walked through the still empty streets of Mayfair, her heart beating like a war drum. She knew where he lived. Everyone knew. Ravenscroft Manor was on the opposite side of Belgrave Square, an imposing construction of dark stone that seemed more like a fortress than a residence. When she reached the gate, a servant looked at her with suspicion. I have business with the Duke, she said, raising her chin. The Duke doesn't receive visits without prior notice. Then notify him. Arabella held the gate bars. Tell him Lady Arabella Ashford is here. The name made the servant blink, shocked, but he disappeared into the house. Minutes dragged like hours, and then, finally, the gate opened. Arabella was led through perfectly manicured gardens to the main entrance. The mansion inside was as imposing as outside. High ceilings, dark wood, artwork that seemed worth fortunes. But there was something more, a sadness that permeated the walls, as if the house were in mourning. Lady Ashford, the voice came from above. She raised her eyes and saw Alexander descending the staircase. He wore only a white shirt open at the collar and dark trousers. His hair was messy, as if he'd just woken up, but his eyes were alert, dangerous. You shouldn't be here, he said, stopping at the base of the stairs. I know. Your father will find out. Let him find out. Something passed over his face. Surprise, perhaps, or admiration. He dismissed the servants with a gesture, and suddenly they were alone in the large empty hall. Why did you come? Alexander asked softly. You killed my brother, Arabella said, and heard her own voice break. You killed Jonathan. Alexander closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there was so much pain in them that Arabella felt her heart contract. Yes, he said simply. I killed him. The confirmation was like a punch. Why? Because he asked me to. Arabella blinked. What? Alexander took a step forward, and she saw the shadows under his eyes, the lines of exhaustion on his face. He looked like a man who carried the weight of 1,000 deaths. Your brother was dying, Arabella, he said, and for the first time used her first name without title. He had a disease, something in his lungs. The doctors said it would be slow, painful. He begged me to end it before it became unbearable. Arabella's legs failed. Alexander caught her before she fell, holding her against his chest. No, she whispered. No, that can't be true. Your father never knew. Jonathan made everyone swear to secrecy. He didn't want your family to see him waste away. Alexander held her tightly, as if it were the only thing preventing both of them from collapsing. So he chose an honorable exit, a duel, with me, his best friend. Arabella looked up into those dark eyes full of pain. He made me promise I'd take care of his family, that I'd protect you. Alexander passed his thumb over her face, wiping away a tear she didn't know had fallen. But your father hates me, and I let him hate me, because it was easier than the truth. You've lived 6 years carrying this alone, she whispered. It's what Jonathan wanted, but it wasn't fair. Alexander smiled sadly. Life rarely is. Arabella didn't think, didn't calculate, just rose on her tiptoes and kissed him. And this time, when he kissed her back, it was different. It was forgiveness, it was understanding. It was the beginning of something that not even God could stop. The kiss deepened, and Arabella felt the world melt around them. Alexander pulled her closer, his hands framing her face with restrained reverence. It wasn't wild like the kiss from the previous night. It was deeper. It was slow, deliberate, as if he were trying to memorize this moment forever, terrified it might be the last. When they finally separated, both were breathless. This is madness, Alexander whispered against her lips but didn't pull away. His forehead rested against hers, and Arabella could feel his heart beating erratically through the thin linen shirt. I know. She closed her eyes, trying to recover some remnant of sanity. But it was useless. She had crossed an invisible line, and there was no return. You're promised to another man. I know. Your father will destroy me if he finds out. I know. She opened her eyes and saw her own madness reflected in those dark eyes. But I can't stop. Alexander made a low sound, something between laughter and despair. He pulled away from her, running his hands through his messy hair. The morning light entering through the tall windows drew shadows on the contour of his face. He looked tired, not physically, but emotionally exhausted. 6 years, he said, looking at nothing. 6 years carrying Jonathan's secret. 6 years being hated by a family I swore to protect, he laughed bitterly. And now I'm corrupting his daughter. You're not corrupting me. Arabella took a step forward, closing the distance he'd tried to create. I came to you. You don't know what you're doing. Then explain to me. She held his face, forcing him to look at her. Explain why this feels right when it should be so wrong. Alexander covered her hands with his. For a long moment they just stayed there, breathing the same air, sharing the same impossible space. Because you're free, he finally said. Even trapped in chains, there's something in you that refuses to be tamed. I see it. I recognize it because... He hesitated. Because I'm trapped too. Trapped in what? In guilt. In promises. In a role I never asked to play. He released her, stepping away again. This time, Arabella let him. Your brother made me promise I'd take care of you. But how can I do that when your family sees me as the enemy? Arabella felt something move inside her, an understanding, a connection that went beyond physical desire. And now? She asked softly. What do we do now? Alexander turned to face her completely, and what she saw in his eyes frightened her. It wasn't hesitation, it was determination. Now you go home, marry the Earl, live the life that was planned for you. Each word seemed to cost him something. And I disappear from your life. No. The word came out louder than Arabella intended. She took a step forward, and then another, until she was before him again. No, she repeated, quieter this time. I won't marry a man I don't love. I won't live a lie. Arabella, you said you see freedom in me, that there's something that refuses to be tamed. She raised her chin, and for the first time in her life, felt truly brave. Then stop trying to cage me like everyone else. Something broke in his expression. Alexander pulled her to him, kissing her with an urgency that stole all the breath from her lungs. This time there was no gentleness, no hesitation, only raw and desperate need. When they separated, Alexander held her face between his hands, looking at her as if memorizing every detail. "If we do this," he began, his voice hoarse, "if we really do this, there's no going back. Your father won't just hate me, he'll destroy me, and you'll be socially ruined." "Then let me be ruined." Arabella covered his hands with hers. "I'd rather be ruined and free than perfect and dead inside." Alexander closed his eyes, and she saw the battle happening inside him. Duty against desire, promises against passion. When he opened them again, there was resignation and something deeper, acceptance. "All right," he whispered, "but we do it my way, carefully, strategically." He kissed her forehead, his lips lingering against her skin. "I won't let you pay the price for my redemption." "What price?" "The price of truth." Alexander stepped away, and Arabella felt the cold of separation. "I'm going to tell your father. About Jonathan. About the disease. About the duel. He won't believe you." "Maybe not. But I have to try." He looked through the window, at the garden outside. "Your brother asked me to protect your family. Lying to them isn't protection. It's cowardice." Arabella felt tears burn her eyes. "And if he still hates you, if the truth doesn't matter, then at least I tried." Alexander turned back to her, and there was a deep sadness in his eyes. "And you'll be free to choose, with full knowledge. I've already chosen. You chose based on lies and mystery." He took a step forward, holding her face again. "I want you to choose me, knowing the whole truth, knowing exactly what you're sacrificing." Arabella didn't know if she wanted to kiss him or hit him. He was being impossible, noble and frustrating at the same time. "Very well," she finally said. "Talk to my father. Tell the truth. But know this, Alexander Blackwell." She rose on her tiptoes until her lips almost touched his. "My choice won't change." She kissed him, quick, decisive, and then pulled away before he could pull her back. "Arabella." 3 days, she said, already moving toward the door. "I give you 3 days to do what you need to do. After that, I'm coming here again. And I won't leave so easily." She didn't wait for an answer. With her heart beating wildly in her chest, Arabella left Ravencroft Manor. The next 3 days were torture. Arabella was forced to participate in afternoon teas with the Earl of Thornfield, to smile while he discussed wedding plans, to nod while her mother chose fabrics for the wedding dress. Each moment was a lie, each smile a betrayal to herself. At night, lying in her bed, she thought of Alexander, wondered if he had already spoken to her father, if the truth had changed anything, if he was thinking of her with the same painful intensity she thought of him. On the second day, Cecilia confronted her. "You're different," her younger sister said, watching her with narrowed eyes while they had tea in the sitting room. Their mother was absent, attending to visitors in another room. "I don't know what you're talking about. You're glowing. And at the same time you look like you're in agony." Cecilia leaned forward, lowering her voice. "It's because of him, isn't it? The Duke." Arabella didn't respond, but felt the blush rise up her neck. "Bella." Cecilia used the childhood nickname, and there was fear in her voice. "You can't. Father will..." "Father will what?" Arabella finally looked at her. "Lock me up. Force me to marry the Earl? If necessary, yes. Then let him." Arabella put the teacup aside, her hands trembling slightly. "But I won't live in a gilded prison anymore, Cece, I won't." Cecilia looked at her as if seeing a stranger. "You've gone mad." "Perhaps." Arabella smiled, and it was a sad smile. "Or perhaps, for the first time, I'm becoming sane." Before her sister could respond, the sitting-room door opened violently. Her father entered like a storm. Lord Ashford was an imposing man under normal circumstances, but at that moment he seemed like a force of nature. His face was red with fury, the veins in his neck bulging, and his eyes, God, his eyes were fixed on Arabella with an intensity that froze her in place. "Leave, Cecilia," he ordered, without taking his eyes off Arabella. "Father, Now!" Cecilia jumped from the chair and practically ran out of the sitting room. The door closed with a final thud. Arabella stood slowly, her heart racing. "Father, the Duke of Ravenscroft was at my house today." Each word came out like a bullet. He told me an absurd story about Jonathan. So Alexander had kept his promise, had revealed the truth. "It's not absurd," Arabella said, finding her voice. "It's true." "Truth?" her father roared, and she'd never seen him like this, not even when Jonathan died. "That murderer has the audacity to come to my house and say that my son, begged him to kill him. Jonathan was sick, father." "He was—" "Lies!" He took a threatening step toward her, and Arabella instinctively pulled back. "All lies to play the victim. And you're defending him?" "I'm believing him." Arabella raised her chin, even with her hands trembling. "I'm believing him." Something dangerous passed over her father's face. He studied her in silence for a long moment, and then, with a deadly calm voice, asked, "You saw him, didn't you? After the ball. You went to him." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "Yes." Arabella saw no point in lying. "I did." Her father closed his eyes, and when he opened them, there was something broken in them. "Do you know what you've done? Do you know what this means?" "It means I won't marry the Earl." The slap came so fast she didn't have time to prepare. Arabella staggered, her hand flying to her burning face. In the 21 years of her life, her father had never raised his hand to her. Not once. "You will marry the Earl." His voice was icy now, controlled, and somehow that was more terrifying than the shouting. "The announcement will be made tomorrow, and the wedding will happen within a month. Father, please. You are confined to this house until the ceremony. No visits, no outings, no contact with the outside world." He turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "And if the Duke of Ravenscroft dares to step near you again, I'll personally make sure he faces the consequences of a duel. A real one. And this time, there will be no mercy." The door slammed, and Arabella collapsed on the floor. The tears came. Violent. Desperate. She hugged her knees to her chest, rocking back and forth, trying to breathe through the sobs. She was trapped. And Alexander. Alexander would be in danger if he tried to reach her. But as she cried there, on the cold sitting room floor, Arabella made a promise to herself. She would find a way, even if she had to burn the entire world to do it. Ashford Manor had become a prison. Arabella spent her days looking out her bedroom window, watching the world continue without her. Her mother came to visit her occasionally, with red eyes and a defeated expression, murmuring empty apologies that neither of them believed. Cecilia slipped notes under the door, messages of support that Arabella treasured like precious jewels, but no word from Alexander. 5 days had passed since the confrontation with her father. 5 days of deafening silence. Arabella didn't know if Alexander was well, if her father had carried out the threat of a duel, if he had given up on her completely. The uncertainty ate her from the inside. On the 6th night, when the moon was only a quarter visible in the sky, Arabella heard a soft sound coming from the window. Pebbles. She rose from the bed, her heart racing. She approached the window carefully and looked down. A figure stood in the gardens, wrapped in shadows. But she would recognize that silhouette anywhere. Alexander. With hands trembling with urgency, Arabella unlocked the window and opened it. The cold night air hit her, bringing with it the smell of roses and danger. "Have you gone mad?" she whispered down. "If my father catches you, we need to talk." His voice was low, urgent. "Come down. I'm locked in. There's a trellis beside your window. Climb down it." Arabella looked to the side, and indeed a trellis covered in ivy climbed up to her second-floor room. It looked fragile, dangerous, perfect. "Give me 2 minutes," she said, and closed the window. Quickly, she put a robe over her nightgown and tied her hair in a loose braid. Then, with her heart beating like war drums, she opened the window again and swung her legs out. The trellis creaked when she put her weight on it, but it held. Inch by inch, Arabella descended, her fingers gripping the rough wood and her feet seeking support in the ivy. When she finally touched the ground, her legs almost gave out. Strong hands steadied her. "You're insane," Alexander said, but there was admiration in his voice. "I learned from the best," she responded, and then she was in his arms. The kiss was hunger. It was relief. It was 6 days of longing concentrated in a single, devastating moment. When they separated, Alexander pressed his forehead against hers, breathing deeply as if trying to anchor himself. "Your father threatened me," he said low, "warned me to stay away. I know. And here I am, climbing your garden like a thief, or like a romance hero." Arabella smiled for the first time in days. Alexander let out a low laugh, and the sound warmed something inside her that had been frozen. "Come, we can't talk here." He guided her through the garden, staying in the shadows, until they reached a small building at the back of the property. It was the old summer house, long abandoned. Alexander pushed the door, and they entered a space full of covered furniture and the smell of mildew. But there was a blanket spread on the floor, candles, a basket with food. Arabella looked at him surprised. "You planned this?" "I've been coming here for 3 nights, he confessed, looking almost embarrassed. "Waiting for you to see my signal." 3 nights. Something broke in Arabella's chest. "Alexander, I couldn't stay away." He held her face, and there was such vulnerability in his eyes that she felt tears burn hers. "I tried. God knows I tried. But each day without you was unbearable." She kissed him, soft, tenderly, pouring all the fear and loneliness and desperate hope into that kiss. When they separated, they sat on the blanket, and Alexander opened the basket. There was bread, cheese, fruit. Simple things, but shared in the shadows, they seemed like a feast. "Tell me," Arabella said as they ate, "what did my father say when you revealed the truth?" Alexander was quiet for a moment. "He didn't believe, or didn't want to believe. Said I was a liar, a manipulator." He looked at his hands. "I think it's easier for him to hate me than accept that Jonathan was suffering, and he didn't notice. It wasn't his fault. No, but guilt looks for a home, and I've always been a convenient target." Arabella held his hand, intertwining their fingers. "So what do we do now? My father is planning the wedding. 1 month, Alexander. I have 1 month before I become Lady Thornfield. You want to know what I think?" Alexander turned to face her completely. "I think we should run away." Arabella blinked. "What?" "Run away. You and me. Tonight, if you want." There was intensity in his gaze. "We can go to Gretna Green. Marry there. When we return, it will be done. Your father can't undo it." Arabella's heart raced. Elopement, marriage, freedom, but... "And my family?" she asked softly. "My mother, Cecilia. If we run away, my father will punish them. You know he will." Alexander closed his eyes, and she saw the frustration in every line of his body. "I know. Damn it. I know. I need a better plan," Arabella said, thinking aloud. "Something that doesn't destroy my family in the process." "There is no better plan, Arabella. Your father will never consent, never. Then I make him change his mind." "How?" She hesitated. An idea was forming in her mind. Dangerous, desperate, but possible. "The Earl," she said slowly. What if the Earl broke off the engagement? If he discovered something that made him give up on me?" Alexander frowned. "Like what?" "Like a bride who's no longer pure." The silence that followed was heavy. "No," Alexander said abruptly, standing up. "I won't ruin you to force a choice." "You wouldn't be ruining me." Arabella stood too, approaching him. "It would be my choice, my decision." "Arabella, you don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." She held his face, forcing him to look at her. "If I'm no longer acceptable to the Earl, he'll break the engagement. And without an engagement, my father has no way to keep me prisoner. He'll despise you. All of society will despise you. But I'll be free to choose you." Alexander closed his eyes, and she saw the battle happening inside him. "There are other ways, ways that don't involve sacrificing your reputation." "Like what?" He didn't answer, and Arabella knew there were no other ways. Not really. "Alexander," she said softly, "I need you to understand something. My reputation is worth less to me than my freedom, and my freedom only exists with you." He opened his eyes, and there was so much emotion in them that Arabella felt her heart contract. "Are you sure?" he whispered. "Absolutely sure. I've never been more sure of anything in my entire life." For a long moment, they just looked at each other, and then, slowly, Alexander pulled her to him. "Then it won't be here," he said low. "Not in an abandoned summer house where you're hiding from your father." He kissed her forehead, his lips lingering against her skin. "When it happens, it will be in my house, in my bed, with all the dignity you deserve." Arabella felt tears burn her eyes. "How will I get to you? I'm locked here." "Tomorrow night there's a dinner," Alexander said, and she realized he'd already thought of everything. "Your father is receiving the Earl and other nobles. You'll be required to attend." "How do you know this?" "Because I was invited too." A bitter smile touched his lips. "Your father wants to torture me, I imagine. Make me watch while he officially announces your engagement." "Then you won't come." "On the contrary." "I will come." Alexander held her hands. "And during dinner you'll pretend to feel ill, ask to be excused. Martha will help you. I know she's on your side. And then? Then you leave through the back. My carriage will be waiting in the back street. My coachman will take you to Ravencroft." He caressed her face. "And there you'll decide. No pressure, no rush. If you change your mind, I'll take you back before anyone notices your absence. I won't change my mind. Even so, I want you to have the option." Arabella rose on her tiptoes and kissed him. It was a different kiss from the previous ones. It wasn't hunger or desperation. It was promise. It was commitment. "Tomorrow night," she whispered against his lips. "Tomorrow night," he confirmed. They stayed in the summer house until almost dawn, talking, sharing stories. Alexander told her about his lonely childhood, about the pressure of inheriting the Duke title at 20 when his father died. Arabella spoke about the years after Jonathan's death, about how the house always seemed emptier, colder. "I used to envy you," Alexander confessed, lying beside her on the blanket, looking at the cracked ceiling. "The Ashford family. You seemed so complete, united. Jonathan always spoke about his sisters with so much love. He loved you too." Arabella turned on her side to face him. "I know it. I can see it now. He never would have asked you something like that if he didn't trust you completely. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing, if I should have refused. He would have suffered. I know. But maybe," he closed his eyes, "maybe if I had refused, you wouldn't hate me now." "I don't hate you." Arabella put her hand on his chest, feeling his heart beat strong. "Not for a second did I hate you." When the first light began to brighten the horizon, Alexander accompanied her back to the trellis. The goodbye kiss was long and sweet, tasting of temporary farewell and promise of reunion. "Until tomorrow," he whispered. "Until tomorrow," she replied, and began to climb. Her muscles protested, but Arabella managed to reach her window. When she looked down one last time, Alexander had already disappeared into the shadows. She entered the room, closed the window, and slid to the floor. A smile touched her lips. Tomorrow. Everything would change tomorrow. The day of the dinner arrived with a suffocating tension. Arabella was released from her confinement temporarily, only to be prepared like a doll for display. 3 maids worked on her hair, creating elaborate curls held with pearls. The dress was sky blue pure silk, with delicate lace at the neckline. She looked like a bride, and felt like a sheep being prepared for sacrifice. "You look beautiful, my lady," Martha said, but her eyes carried concern. Arabella waited until the other maids left. Then, quietly, she whispered, "I need your help tonight." Martha didn't seem surprised. "What do you need?" "During dinner, I'm going to pretend I'm feeling ill. When I excuse myself, I need you to help me leave through the back, without anyone seeing." The older woman closed her eyes. "This has to do with the Duke, doesn't it?" "Yes." "Lady Arabella, if your father finds out..." He won't find out. And even if he does, Arabella held her hands. Martha, for the first time in my life, I'm making a choice. My choice. I need you to understand that. Martha looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly, she nodded. All right, I'll help you. But promise you'll be careful. I promise. The dinner was a spectacle of falsehood. 20 guests sat at the long dining room table. Crystal gleamed under the candlelight, shining silver. Dishes covered with delicacies that Arabella could barely swallow. The Earl of Thornfield was seated to her right, talking about the estate they'd inherit, about the children he hoped to have. Arabella smiled and nodded, but his words didn't really penetrate, because across the table, 3 seats down, was Alexander. He wore an impeccable black coat, hair elegantly tied back. He looked every inch the powerful duke. But when his eyes met hers, which happened more often than would be appropriate, she saw the man behind the title, the man who had held her in the darkness, who had kissed her as if she were air. Her father noticed. Duke of Ravenscroft. Lord Ashford spoke loud enough for the entire table to hear. What a surprise to have you with us tonight. I thought you had more urgent commitments. Alexander didn't take the bait. No commitment more important than honoring your hospitality, Lord Ashford. Hospitality, her father repeated, and there was venom in the word. Yes, hospitality. The Earl looked between the 2 men, confused. Is there some tension I'm unaware of? Old history, Alexander said softly. Nothing that should concern you, Lord Thornfield. But the Earl wasn't a fool. His eyes narrowed, and Arabella saw suspicion born in them. That's when she acted. Excuse me. She put her hand to her forehead, making her voice tremble slightly. I'm feeling dizzy. Arabella. Her mother stood immediately. Are you all right? Just the heat, I think, and the corset is too tight. She stood, and Martha appeared as if conjured. If you'll permit me, Father, I'd like to excuse myself for a few moments. Her father studied her with narrowed eyes. For a terrible second, Arabella thought he'd see through the lie, but then he waved his hand. Go, but return quickly. There's an announcement to be made. Yes, Father. Martha led her out of the dining room. As soon as they were in the corridor, Arabella straightened. Quickly, she whispered. They ran through the back corridors, Martha guiding the way through the kitchen where the servants were too busy to notice, through the back door, through the herb garden. And there, in the back street, was a black carriage without a crest. Go, Martha pushed her gently. And may God protect you, my child. Arabella hugged her quickly. Thank you for everything. Then she ran to the carriage. The door opened before she reached it, and Hans pulled her inside. Alexander. You came, he said, and there was such relief in his voice. I would always come, she replied. The carriage moved, and as London passed by the windows, Arabella knew she had crossed the point of no return. There was no going back, only forward. And Alexander. Ravenscroft Manor was silent when they arrived. Alexander helped Arabella descend from the carriage, his hand firm on hers. The mansion rose before them like a dark sentinel, windows illuminated by a warm glow that invited her inside. The servants were dismissed, Alexander said low, as he guided her up the stone steps. There will be no witnesses, nothing that could compromise you if you change your mind. Arabella squeezed his hand. I won't change my mind. Inside, the mansion was wrapped in half-light. Candles burned in sparse candelabras, casting dancing shadows on the mahogany walls. The air smelled of wax and something more, old wood, ancient books, and the subtle scent that was uniquely Alexander. He led her up the staircase, their steps echoing in the silence. Arabella felt her heart beat faster with each step, not from fear, from anticipation. His chambers were on the 3rd floor. When Alexander opened the door, Arabella saw a large room dominated by an enormous, dark canopy bed. There was a lit fireplace casting warm golden light. Tall windows looked out over the gardens below. It was masculine, elegant, and somehow safe. Wine? Alexander offered, and she realized he was nervous. The powerful Duke of Ravenscroft was nervous. "Yes," she said, more to calm him than from actually wanting it. He poured 2 glasses, and when he handed one to her, their fingers touched. The electricity of the contact ran up Arabella's arm. They drank in silence for a moment. Arabella walked to the window, looking out at the night beyond. The moon was almost full now, casting silver light over the gardens. "There's still time." Alexander's voice came from behind her. "I can take you back. No one will know." Arabella put the glass aside and turned to face him. "Do you want me to leave?" "No." The word came out hoarse. "God help me, no. But I need to know. I need to be sure you understand what this means." "Then explain." She took a step toward him. "Explain what this means." Alexander put his own glass aside, and when he looked at her there was such intensity in his eyes that Arabella felt the air fail. "It means you'll never be able to marry the Earl, that your reputation will be destroyed if anyone finds out." He took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "It means you'll be bound to me, a man your family hates, a man marked by scandal." "Good." Arabella raised her hand and touched his face, feeling the roughness of stubble under her fingers. "Because I'm tired of gilded cages. I'd rather be bound to you than free with anyone else." Something broke in Alexander. He pulled her to him, kissing her with an intensity that stole all the breath from her lungs. His hand slid down the sides of her body, mapping every curve through the thin silk of the dress. "Arabella," he whispered against her lips, and her name sounded like a prayer, like a curse, like the only truth that mattered. "Show me," she said, holding his face between her hands. "Show me what it's like to be free." Alexander lifted her in his arms as if she weighed nothing, and Arabella clung to his shoulders as he carried her to the bed. When he laid her on the soft linen sheets, he hovered over her, his eyes traveling over her face as if memorizing every detail. "You're so beautiful," he whispered, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. "And I'm a damned man. Then let's save each other." Arabella pulled him down, kissing him with all the passion she'd repressed for days, for years, for a lifetime of being the perfect daughter. There was no more fear, no more hesitation, only the overwhelming certainty that they belonged to each other. Alexander pulled her close, wrapping her in his arms as if she were the most precious thing in the world. The world outside, the threats, the rules, the impossible complications, ceased to exist. In the quiet of the room, surrounded by shadows and golden light, it wasn't just physical. It was soul-recognizing soul. It was freedom finding freedom. It was love, even if neither of them had the courage to say the word yet. After a long time, lying entwined in the tangled sheets, Arabella traced lazy circles on Alexander's chest. She could hear his heart beating strong, gradually returning to normal rhythm. "There's no going back now," he said quietly, his fingers sliding through her loose hair. "There never was." Arabella raised herself on her elbow to look at him. "Alexander, I love you." He froze. His eyes searched hers, as if trying to find lies or hesitation. But all he saw was truth. "You shouldn't," he said, but his voice was broken. Too late. Alexander pulled her back into his arms, holding her as if she were the only thing preventing him from falling apart. "I love you too. God help me, I've loved you since that first night, since I saw you at the masquerade ball looking like a bird trapped in a cage." Arabella felt tears burn her eyes, but they were good tears, tears of relief. "And now," she asked, "my father will discover my absence. He'll know. Let him know." Alexander kissed the top of her head. "Tomorrow morning, I'll go personally to your house. I'll officially ask for your hand. And if he refuses—" He paused. "Then we'll run away. Gretna Green, where he can't stop us. He'll challenge you to a duel. Then I accept." Alexander made her look at him. "Arabella, there's nothing I wouldn't face for you." She kissed him, long and deep, pouring all her love into that kiss. They fell asleep like that, entwined, while the moon crossed the sky outside. And for the first time in their lives, both dreamed of freedom. Arabella woke to sunlight invading the room. For a disorienting moment, she didn't recognize where she was. The sheets were softer than hers, The ceiling had exposed beams, and there was a warm weight around her. Alexander. Memories of the previous night flooded her, not with shame, but with a sense of peace she had never known. She turned carefully, trying not to wake him, and observed his sleeping face. He looked younger like this. The worry lines softened. His jaw relaxed. Dark hair falling over his forehead. A wave of tenderness so strong it hit her. I love this man. As if sensing her gaze, Alexander opened his eyes. For an instant they just stayed like that, looking at each other in the golden morning light. "Good morning," he said, voice rough with sleep. "Good morning," she smiled. He pulled her closer, kissing her softly. It was different from the kisses of the previous night. There was no urgency, just tenderness. "You have to go back," he murmured against her lips, "before the house fully wakes." Reality fell over Arabella like ice water. She nodded, reluctant to leave the warmth and safety of his arms. They dressed in silence. Alexander helped her with the laces of her dress, his fingers slower and more careful than when he'd untied them. When he finished, he turned her to face him. "I'll give you 2 hours," he said. 2 hours to be home, to prepare, and then I'm going there. I'm going to speak with your father. He won't agree." "I know." Alexander held her face. "But I have to try. I have to do things the right way, even if the result is the same." Arabella covered his hands with hers. "And if he challenges you?" "I accept the challenge, but I won't kill him." His eyes were firm. "No matter what happens, I won't take another Ashford from this world." "Alexander, promise me something." He interrupted her. "Promise that no matter what your father says, no matter what threats he makes, you won't give up on us." "I promise," she said without hesitation. "I promise with my life." He kissed her one last time, and then led her to the waiting carriage. The journey back to Ashford Manor was too quick. When the carriage stopped in the same back street where she'd left, Arabella felt the weight of reality crush her shoulders. 2 hours, Alexander reminded her through the window. 2 hours, she confirmed. The house was in chaos when Arabella entered through the back. Servants ran from one side to the other. Loud voices echoed from the upper floors, and Martha was in the kitchen, her face pale as wax. "Lady Arabella," she ran to hug her. "Thank God! Your father he's in a fury. He knows you left." "How?" "The Earl. He went looking for you during dinner, to make the official announcement. When you weren't found," Martha swallowed hard, "he became suspicious, and your father. My God, I've never seen anything like it." As if conjured by the words, heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor. The kitchen door opened violently, and Lord Ashford appeared like a storm. His eyes found Arabella, and the hatred in them froze her in place. "You," he said, his voice deadly calm. "Where have you been?" Arabella raised her chin. "With the Duke of Ravenscroft." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the servants stopped moving, frozen in shock. "Repeat that." Her father took a threatening step. "Repeat what you just said." "I was with Alexander Blackwell, all night." She didn't look away. "And I don't regret it." His hand rose, but this time Arabella didn't pull back. She faced him directly, daring him to proceed. He didn't strike. Instead, something worse happened. He laughed, a cold laugh without humor. "So that's how it is," he said. "My own daughter, ruined by my son's murderer." "Jonathan asked to die, Father. He was sick, suffering." "Lies." The roar shook the walls. "Lies planted by that demon in your naive mind. They're not lies." "And you know it." Arabella took a step forward. "Deep down you've always known, that's why you're so furious. Because the truth is easier to bear than admitting you failed, Jonathan." The slap came, hard and fast. Arabella staggered, her cheek burning, but she stayed standing. "Go to your room," her father said, his voice trembling with contained fury. "And stay there until I decide what to do with you." "No." Arabella raised her head, ignoring the stinging pain in her face. "I'm no longer a child you can order around. I love Alexander Blackwell, and I'm going to marry him. You will do no such thing." Her father approached until they were almost nose to nose. "Because if you try, I swear to God, I'll destroy that man. Take everything from him. The title, the lands, his life, if necessary. Then you'll have to destroy me too," Arabella said calmly, "because I won't give him up." For a long moment, father and daughter stared at each other. Two iron wills colliding. Then Lord Ashford stepped back. "Guards," he shouted, "take Lady Arabella to her chambers. Lock the door. No one enters or leaves without my permission." Rough hands grabbed Arabella's arms. She didn't fight, just looked at her father with all the calm she could muster. "Alexander will come," she said, "in 2 hours, and when he comes, you can't stop me from choosing him." "He won't get near this house," her father promised. "I guarantee it." Arabella was dragged upstairs through the corridors to her room. The door slammed behind her, and she heard the key turn in the lock. She was trapped again. But this time it was different, because this time she wasn't alone. Alexander would come. She trusted that with every fiber of her being. The 2 hours passed with agonizing slowness. Arabella paced back and forth in the room, her nerves stretched to the breaking point. She could hear movements outside, low voices, footsteps. Her father was preparing. When she finally heard the sound of a carriage arriving, she ran to the window. It was Alexander. He descended from the carriage dressed impeccably, every inch the powerful duke. But Arabella saw the tension in his shoulders, the determination in every step. Her father met him on the entrance steps. Arabella couldn't hear what they said, but she saw the body language, Alexander speaking calmly, her father responding with violent gestures, and then her father slammed the door in Alexander's face. "No!" Arabella screamed, pounding on the window, but they couldn't hear her. Alexander remained on the steps for a long moment. Then, slowly, he turned around, and Arabella felt her heart shatter. He's giving up. But then she saw something that made her hold her breath. Alexander didn't go to the carriage. Instead, he walked around the mansion, toward the back gardens, toward her window. Arabella watched with her heart racing as Alexander disappeared from view. Minutes dragged like hours. She pressed her face against the cold glass of the window, trying to see where he'd gone. And then she heard it, the sound of pebbles against glass. She opened the window violently, and there he was, in the gardens below, looking up with those dark eyes that had become her entire world. "The trellis," he called low. "Come down. My father has guards." "I know." "That's why you have to be quick." Arabella didn't hesitate. She climbed onto the window ledge, her muslin dress fluttering in the wind. The trellis looked more fragile in daylight, but it didn't matter. Alexander was waiting. She began to descend, her fingers gripping the rough wood. Halfway down, she heard shouts coming from the house. "They found you!" Alexander shouted. "Quick!" Arabella descended faster, not caring about the scratches on her hands or the way the dress tore on the branches. When she was meters from the ground, she simply let go. Alexander caught her, cushioning the fall with his own body. Both fell on the lawn, him underneath her. "Are you all right?" he asked urgently, his hands running over her face. "I am. Let's go." They stood and ran, through the gardens, jumping flower beds, passing the central fountain. Behind them, Arabella heard shouts, footsteps, her father roaring orders. "There!" Alexander pointed to the back wall. It was high, covered in ivy. "I can lift you. On the other side there's a street. My carriage is waiting." When they reached the wall, Alexander interlaced his hands. "Step here." Arabella put her foot in his hands, and he lifted her with force. She grabbed the top of the wall, pulling herself up. The stone scratched her palms, but she managed to stand on top. She looked down. It was a considerable drop on the other side. "Jump!" Alexander shouted. "I'll catch you." He was climbing the wall behind her, moving with impressive agility, but the guards were getting closer. Arabella jumped. The air whistled in her ears, and then strong hands caught her, spinning to absorb the impact. Alexander staggered, but stayed standing. "Run!" He pulled her by the hand. The carriage was meters away. The coachman already had the door open. They ran, and Arabella was practically thrown inside. Alexander jumped in behind her, pounding on the wall. "Go!" The carriage shot forward. Arabella fell on the bench, breathless, her heart beating so fast it hurt. Through the back window, she saw the guards reach the wall, saw her father appear, his face contorted in fury. And then they turned a corner and Ashford Manor disappeared from view. Silence fell over them. Arabella began to laugh. Not from joy, from pure hysterical relief. Alexander pulled her into his arms, holding her tight while she trembled. "Are you all right?" he asked, pushing the messy hair from her face. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, just scared, relieved, I don't know." She looked at him and saw her own feelings reflected in those dark eyes. "Where are we going?" "Gretna Green," Alexander said. "It's the only way. We marry there, and when we return it will be done. Your father can't undo it. It's a long journey. 3 days, maybe 4, depending on road conditions." He caressed her face. "Are you sure? There's still time to go back to—" Arabella kissed him, silencing the words. When she pulled away, she held his face between her hands. "I stopped having doubts the night you kissed me on the terrace. Everything since then has just been time until this moment." She smiled, and it was a true smile. "Free. I'm going to marry you, Alexander Blackwell, and not all my father's hatred can stop that." He kissed her again, deep and devastating. And as the carriage sped along the roads leading away from London, Arabella didn't look back, only forward, to the future, to freedom. The days on the road were simultaneously the hardest and happiest of Arabella's life. Hard because they slept in modest inns, ate simple food, and the carriage rattled their bones to exhaustion. Happy because, for the first time, they were together without lies or secrets. Just them two. At night, lying in narrow beds in noisy inns, Alexander held her and told stories of his childhood, about a lonely boy who grew up in a too large mansion with a demanding father and no mother to soften the expectations. "My mother died when I was born," he told her on the second night, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arms. "My father never forgave me for it. Every time he looked at me, he saw the woman he'd lost." "It wasn't your fault," Arabella whispered. "I know that now. But when you're a child," he sighed, "when you're a child you believe what they tell you, and my father always made it clear I was a disappointment. Jonathan saw you differently." "Yes." A sad smile touched his lips. "Jonathan was the first person who saw me as something beyond the title. He was my friend when I didn't even know what true friendship was. That's why honoring his request was so important to you. It was all I could do, the only thing I could give him." Alexander turned to face her completely. "And now I'm here with you, and part of me feels like I'm betraying that promise." "You're not." Arabella put her hand over his heart. "Jonathan asked you to protect my family, and you are. You're protecting me from a life of unhappiness, from a prison disguised as marriage. Your father wouldn't see it that way. My father is blind with pain and pride," she sighed. "Maybe one day he'll understand. But even if he doesn't, I've made my choice." On the third night they stopped at a larger inn with a hall where other travelers dined. Arabella, wearing one of the simple dresses Alexander had bought in a village, felt strangely free without the layers of silk and etiquette of her previous life. "Are you happy?" Alexander asked, as they ate simple stew that tasted better than any banquet in her memory. "Incredibly," she answered honestly. "I know I should be worried, that we should be planning what to do when we return. But right now, in this moment, yes, I'm happy." He held her hand across the table, intertwining their fingers. "When we return, there will be scandal. Society will reject you. The Earl will probably demand reparations." "Let him demand. And your father—" Alexander hesitated. "Your father might challenge me to a duel. We've already discussed this. You won't kill him." "No, but he might try to kill me." Alexander squeezed her hand. "And if that happens, Arabella, I need you to know, no moment with you will have been wasted. Even if we only have these days, they were the best of my life." Tears burned her eyes. "Don't talk like that. Don't talk as if it were goodbye." "It's not goodbye. It's a promise." He lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles. that I'll fight for us, always. On the fourth day, they crossed the border into Scotland. Gretna Green was a small village, famous for being the destination of eloping couples. Here the laws were different. Here they didn't need permission from parents or the church, just witnesses and a declaration of commitment. The local blacksmith, a burly man with kind eyes, received them with a knowing smile. "Another eloping couple, eh?" he said, gesturing for them to enter. "Good. Love is always worth the rebellion." The ceremony was simple. There were no flowers or music. Just Alexander and Arabella holding hands, making vows that came from the heart. "I promise to love you," Alexander said, looking into her eyes, "in scandal and redemption, in light and darkness, until death do us part." "I promise to choose you," Arabella responded, her voice trembling with emotion, "every day in every life, until there's no more breath in my lungs." The blacksmith struck the anvil, the sound echoing like a bell. "I declare you husband and wife." Alexander pulled her to him, kissing her while the witnesses applauded. And in that moment, in a small blacksmith shop in Gretna Green, far from everything they knew, Arabella felt completely, totally free. She was Arabella Blackwell now, Duchess of Ravenscroft, and nothing, absolutely nothing, could undo that. The journey back to London was different. Arabella was no longer Lady Ashford, obedient daughter and promised bride. She was the Duchess of Ravenscroft, wife of a man society feared and her family hated. But he was hers, and she was his. They were in no hurry. They stopped in villages, walked through fields covered with wildflowers, dined in small taverns where no one knew them. For 5 glorious days they were just Alexander and Arabella, two newlyweds discovering each other. At night, in modest inn-rooms, he loved her with a tenderness that made her cry. And in the mornings she woke in his arms, still marveling that this was real. But as London approached, reality began to weigh. "They're going to hate us," Arabella said, on the last night before reaching the city. They were lying together, moonlight entering through the small window. "Society, my family." Yes, Alexander didn't lie. He never lied to her. Probably they will. "And you, will you regret it?" He turned to look at her, and there was such intensity in his eyes that it stole her breath. "Regret is for those who don't know the value of what they have. I know exactly your value, Arabella, and I wouldn't trade a second by your side for all the world's approval." She kissed him, pouring all her love into that kiss. And when they held each other that night, it was different. It had a touch of goodbye, not to each other, but to the peace they'd found away from the world, because tomorrow the world would return. They arrived at Ravenscroft Manor at noon. The great dark stone house had never seemed so imposing. The servants received them with surprise and, Arabella noticed, with poorly disguised curiosity. News travelled fast among the staff. "Welcome to your home," Alexander said, helping her descend from the carriage. My home. The words seemed surreal. But before they could enter, a familiar carriage turned the corner. The Ashford coat of arms gleamed on the side. Arabella felt Alexander stiffen beside her. Her hand found his, squeezing. "Together," she whispered. "Together," he confirmed. The carriage stopped, and who descended wasn't her father. It was Cecilia. Her younger sister ran toward her, and Arabella met her halfway. They hugged, and Arabella felt tears wet her shoulder. "You really did it," Cecilia said, laughing and crying at the same time. "You really ran away and married him." "I did." Arabella pulled back to look at her. "Are you furious with me?" "Furious? I'm—" Cecilia wiped her tears. "I'm envious, and proud, and terrified for you. Is father very furious? Beyond furious, he's—" Cecilia looked at Alexander, and there was caution in her eyes. "He's planning something. I don't know what, but I've heard conversations, lawyers, threats about contesting the marriage." "He can't contest a Scottish marriage," Alexander said calmly. "It's legal by law. That won't stop him from trying." Cecilia squeezed Arabella's hands. "I came to warn you, and—" She hesitated. And because I wanted to see you, to make sure you were all right. I'm more than all right. Arabella smiled. I'm happy, Cece. Truly happy. Cecilia looked between her and Alexander. Then slowly she curtsied to the Duke. Take care of my sister, Your Grace, or you'll have to answer to me. Alexander inclined his head, respectful. I'll care for her as if she were more precious than life. You have my word. Cecilia nodded, satisfied. Then perhaps there's hope. She hugged Arabella once more. Be strong. The storm is coming. But if you survived this far, you can survive anything. After Cecilia left, Arabella and Alexander entered the mansion. But they'd barely reached the hall when a messenger arrived. A letter, sealed with the Ashford crest. Alexander opened it, and Arabella saw his expression harden as he read. What is it? Your father is calling a council, tomorrow, at the Prince Regent's residence. He looked at her. He's going to try to publicly disgrace me, take my title for abducting you. But I went willingly. Your word against his, and he was your legal guardian. Alexander crumpled the paper. He's using every connection he has. Then we fight. Arabella raised her chin. We go to this council and we tell the truth. You don't have to. I have to. We're husband and wife now. We face everything together. She held his face. I won't let you fight alone. The Prince Regent's hall was packed. Nobles, lords, members of Parliament, all watching as Arabella and Alexander entered. She wore an emerald green dress, simple but elegant. Beside her, Alexander was impeccable in formal attire. Lord Ashford was seated in an elevated chair like a judge. Upon seeing her, his eyes narrowed. Arabella, he said, and his voice echoed through the hall. You finally show your face. I came willingly, father, she replied calmly. As I went with Alexander willingly. You were manipulated, corrupted by a man who killed your brother. A murmur ran through the crowd. No. Arabella took a step forward. Jonathan was dying. And Alexander, he gave Jonathan the honorable death he requested. Lies! Her father stood. Do you hear this? The lies this man has planted in my daughter's head? They're not lies. A new voice echoed from the entrance. Everyone turned. An elderly man, bent by years but with eyes still sharp, entered leaning on a cane. It was Dr. Morrison, the Ashford family physician. Dr. Morrison? Lord Ashford paled. What are you doing here? I've been your family's physician for 30 years, Edward, the old man said, addressing her father by his first name. And I've carried a secret that has eaten at me all these years. He looked at Arabella. Your brother was, in fact, sick. Lung disease, terminal. I made an oath to keep it secret, but... He raised a yellowed envelope. Jonathan left me this, with instructions to open it only if the truth became necessary. He extended the envelope to Arabella. With trembling hands, she opened it. It was a letter, in Jonathan's familiar handwriting, and she read aloud. If you're reading this, it means the truth finally matters. Father, I know you love me, but I also know you'd never accept my choice, so I chose for you. Alexander Blackwell is not my murderer, he's my savior. He gave me peace when there was only pain ahead. Forgive him, forgive yourself, and let those we love live free from the chains of our mistakes. With eternal love, Jonathan. Silence, absolute silence in the hall. Arabella looked at her father and saw tears, for the first time in 6 years, streaming down his face. Jonathan, he whispered, his voice broken. My son. Lord Ashford collapsed in the chair, his body shaken by sobs that came from a place too deep for words. The powerful man, the relentless lord, was shattered. Arabella felt Alexander's hand squeeze hers. She looked at him, saw the pain reflected in his eyes. 6 years. 6 years carrying that weight alone. Slowly she approached her father. Father, she said softly, kneeling beside the chair. Jonathan didn't want you to suffer. He just wanted peace. I should have known, her father said through tears. I should have seen, but I was so blind, so focused on business, on politics, that I didn't see my own son wasting away. He loved you too much to let you see him like that. Arabella held his hand. And Alexander. Alexander honored Jonathan's last request, at a terrible cost to himself. Her father raised his eyes. He looked across the hall at Alexander, who remained still, waiting. Judgment, condemnation, anything. You! Lord Ashford stood slowly, still holding Jonathan's letter. He walked to Alexander, and Arabella held her breath. For a moment, the two men just looked at each other. Then her father extended his hand. "Forgive me," he said, his voice hoarse. "Forgive me for 6 years of hatred you didn't deserve." Alexander looked at the extended hand, then at Arabella, and then, slowly, he shook it. "There's nothing to forgive," he said low. "You were grieving, and I should have told the truth from the beginning. You honored my son's request. That—" Lord Ashford breathed deeply, trying to compose himself. "That requires more courage than I'll ever have." He turned to Arabella, and there was such sadness in his eyes that she felt her heart squeeze. "And you, my daughter, I tried to cage you, force you into a life you didn't want." He touched her face gently. "Forgive me. Forgive me for not seeing I was making the same mistake, focusing so much on what I thought was right that I didn't see what you really needed. Father." Arabella hugged him, and for the first time in years felt like the little girl she used to be, protected, loved. "I forgive you, I'll always forgive you." When they separated, her father looked at the hall full of nobles who had witnessed everything. "This council is closed," he declared. "The marriage between my daughter and the Duke of Ravenscroft is valid, and anyone who questions this will answer to me personally." A murmur ran through the crowd, but no one protested. The Prince Regent, who had observed everything in silence, stood. "A moving story, Lord Ashford, and a lesson for all of us." He looked at Alexander and Arabella. "May love always be stronger than pride. You have my blessing." In the weeks that followed, London spoke of little beyond the scandal that became a reconciliation. Society, always eager for drama, divided itself. Some despised Arabella for ruining herself before marriage. Others admired her for having the courage to defy conventions. But regardless of opinions, one thing was certain. No one could ignore the Blackwells. The Earl of Thornfield, initially furious, eventually accepted a generous financial compensation from Lord Ashford and quietly withdrew. Rumours said he was already courting another young lady, more docile and less problematic. Arabella didn't care. She was busy transforming Ravenscroft Manor into a home. The dark rooms came to life with fresh flowers. The heavy curtains were opened, letting sunlight invade. And slowly, the house that had always seemed to be in mourning began to breathe again. "Are you happy?" Alexander asked one night, finding her in the garden where she supervised the planting of new rose bushes. "Delirious," she replied, turning to hug him. His arms wrapped around her, and she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I never imagined happiness could be like this." "Like what?" "Simple, real, not performative." She raised her face to look at him. "All my life was a performance, being the perfect daughter, the perfect bride. But with you, as I can just be. And you are extraordinary." He kissed her forehead. "Every day I wonder how I got so lucky." "It wasn't luck." Arabella smiled. "It was choice. My choice." He kissed her then, there in the garden under the stars, and Arabella felt completely, totally at peace. A month after the council there was a dinner, but this time it was different. It was at Ravenscroft Manor, and the guests included not just nobles, but also the Ashford family. Arabella watched nervously as her mother, father and Cecilia entered. It was the first time they'd visited since the wedding. "Arabella." Her mother hugged her tight, tears in her eyes. "The house is beautiful. You're beautiful." "Thank you, Mother." Cecilia pulled her into an enthusiastic hug. "You have to tell me everything, every detail of Gretna Green. And also," she lowered her voice, looking around with shining eyes, "I also want to know what it's like, well, to be truly happy." Arabella laughed, blushing. "Cece." "What? I'm curious." The dinner was healing. Conversations flowed, laughter echoed, and when her father and Alexander talked about politics and business like old friends, Arabella felt something settle in her chest. Forgiveness, redemption, new beginning. After the guests left, Arabella and Alexander were alone in the hall, the candles burning low. "Do you think Jonathan is proud?" she asked softly. "Of us?" Alexander pulled her into his arms. "I think he's at peace, and I think wherever he is, he's smiling. I hope so." Arabella closed her eyes. "Because without him, without his sacrifice, we never would have found each other." "Maybe that was the intention," Alexander said thoughtfully. "Maybe somehow he knew that you'd need someone, and that I'd need you to remind me there's life beyond guilt." "Then let's live." Arabella looked at him. "Let's live for him, for us, for all those who didn't have the chance." "Agreed." Alexander sealed the promise with a kiss. 6 months later, Ravenscroft Manor was in a flurry. Servants ran preparing everything for a special announcement. Flowers filled every room. The aroma of fresh bread and spices came from the kitchen. In the main bedroom, Arabella observed her reflection in the mirror. Her body had changed in recent months, subtly but visibly. There was a new softness in her form, a glow in her eyes. The door opened, and Alexander entered. He stopped upon seeing her, that familiar look of admiration crossing his face. "You're radiant," he said, approaching. "I'm pregnant," Arabella said, the words coming out in a marveling whisper. "The doctor confirmed this morning." Alexander froze. For a moment he just looked at her. Then slowly a smile spread across his face, the kind of smile she rarely saw, pure, uninhibited, joyful. "A baby," he whispered, kneeling and placing his hands on her still flat belly. "Our baby, our baby," Arabella repeated, running her fingers through his hair. "We're creating a life, Alexander, a new life free from all the shadows of the past." He pressed his face against her belly, and she felt the wetness of tears through the fabric of her dress. "Jonathan would have loved this," he said, his voice choked. "He would have loved being an uncle." "Then we'll tell our child about him," Arabella promised. "About the brave uncle who chose dignity over pain, who asked a friend the most difficult favor, and who, even in death, united two people who should have been enemies." Alexander stood, pulling her into a tight hug. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "I love you more than words can express." "I love you too," Arabella replied, holding him tight. "Today, tomorrow, for all the days we have left." 1 year later, the garden of Ravenscroft Manor was perfect for a picnic. Blankets spread on the grass, baskets of food, and in the center of everything, a small dark-haired child wobbling in first unsteady steps. Jonathan Ashford Blackwell, named after the uncle he'd never meet, but whose legacy would live through him. "Careful, little one," Arabella said, laughing as the boy almost stumbled. Alexander caught him at the last second, lifting him in the air. The baby laughed, the sound filling the garden with joy. Lord and Lady Ashford watched the scene with smiles. Cecilia was lying on the blanket, reading a poetry book, and Martha, now officially governess of Ravenscroft Manor, organized the food with caring efficiency. "I never thought I'd see this day," Lord Ashford said low, sitting beside Alexander, while both watched Arabella play with their son. "My daughter happy, my family reunited, and you." He looked at Alexander. "A son I never had, but should have always had. The honor is mine," Alexander replied sincerely. "Jonathan made the right choice," Lord Ashford said, and for the first time in years his name didn't come accompanied by pain but by peace. "He trusted you, and you've honored that trust in every way possible. I do my best. You do more than that. You love my daughter, care for her, and you're raising my grandson with kindness and strength." Lord Ashford put his hand on Alexander's shoulder. "That's all a father could ask for." Arabella approached, little Jonathan in her arms. The baby reached out to his grandfather, and Lord Ashford took him with a tenderness that contrasted with his imposing appearance. "You're going to grow up strong, little one," he murmured to the baby, "and free. Free to choose your own path, like your mother did." Arabella looked at Alexander, and in that look there was everything: love, gratitude, promise. They had started as enemies, united by tragedy and separated by hatred. But they chose each other. And in that choice, they found not just love but redemption. For Alexander, who carried guilt for so long. For Arabella, who learned that freedom comes from courage. For Lord Ashford, who discovered that forgiveness heals more than revenge. And for Jonathan, whose death was not in vain but the catalyst for new life. As the sun set over the garden, casting golden light over the reunited family, Arabella knew she was finally where she should be. Not in a grand mansion with rigid rules. Not in an arranged marriage with a stranger, but here, with the man she chose, with the family she built, with the love she fought to conquer, and with a future that was entirely, completely hers. Free. Finally, free. Epilogue. 10 years later. The ballroom of Ravenscroft Manor was full for the annual summer ball. But this time, there were no masks. There were no secrets, just celebration. Arabella, now 31 and more beautiful than ever, watched as her 3 children, Jonathan 10 years old, Cecilia 7, and little Elizabeth 4, danced with cousins and friends. "What are you thinking about?" Alexander asked, appearing at her side and wrapping his arm around her waist. "About how life changes," she replied, leaning into him. 10 years ago, I was at a ball like this, feeling trapped. And now you're trapped to me," he joked, kissing her neck. "Exactly." She turned to face him, and even after 10 years her heart still beat faster when she looked into those dark eyes. "And I wouldn't trade this prison for all the freedom in the world." "Neither would I." He pulled her onto the dance floor. "Dance with me, my Duchess." "Always," she replied. And as they danced, surrounded by the family they'd healed and the children they'd raised, Arabella knew that some stories really do have happy endings. Not because they're easy, but because they're chosen. Every day, with love, with courage, and with the certainty that true love is worth every sacrifice, every tear, every battle, because in the end, love always wins. Always. Thank you for following this epic journey of love, redemption, and courage. If you enjoyed this story, leave your comment and subscribe to the channel for more emotional Regency-era romances.